Please subscribe the channel, like and share the video for more video. Hey everyone, tonight, we're drifting back to a time of heavy velvet curtains, echoing stone corridors, and people with far too much power for how unwell they usually were. So go ahead and get comfortable. Lower the lights. Put the phone face down if you can. You don't need to remember names. You don't need to follow family trees. In fact, if everything starts to blur together into a haze of crowns, cousins, and quiet disappointment, you're doing this exactly right. This is history designed for rest, history told softly, history that understands you're tired. Tonight, we're spending some time with European royalty. Not the heroic kind from statues, but the sickly, spoiled, anxious, and frequently confused kind, the ones who inherited entire countries, and absolutely no emotional stability. And we'll begin, as so many royal disasters began, with marriage. Royal marriages that went horribly, genetically wrong for most of European history. Royal marriage was not romantic, it was logistical. A contract, a diplomatic maneuver wrapped in lace. You married to secure land. You married to stop wars. You married to keep power neatly contained within a small group of people who already had too much of it. Love was optional, compatibility was irrelevant, and personal happiness was optimistic. This led to a simple solution that seemed very sensible at the time. Marry within the family. After all, you knew these people. You trusted them. They already had the right blood. And so the royal families of Europe began marrying cousins, and then marrying their cousins' cousins, and then marrying their nieces, and occasionally their uncles, because of course they did. They told themselves it was about purity, about divine right, about keeping the bloodline strong. What they actually kept was a recurring set of facial features, and a growing list of medical issues no one had names for yet. Let's drift gently toward the most famous example, the Habsburgs. The Habsburg family ruled enormous parts of Europe for centuries. They were everywhere: Spain, Austria, the Holy Roman Empire. If there was a throne nearby, a Habsburg was probably sitting on it, or waiting impatiently for someone else to die. They were powerful, they were wealthy, and they were deeply committed to marrying each other. Generation after generation, the same names reappeared, the same faces, the same jaw. The Habsburg jaw became so distinctive that you can trace it through portraits like a slow-moving curse, long, heavy, protruding. By the 1600s, it was no longer subtle, which brings us, inevitably, to Charles II of Spain. Charles II was born in 1661. He was the end result of centuries of careful, enthusiastic inbreeding. Genetically speaking, his family tree was more of a family loop. Charles was sick from the moment he arrived. He didn't walk until he was 4. He didn't speak clearly until much later. He struggled with basic motor skills. He had seizures, digestive problems, chronic weakness, and that jaw, the jaw that made chewing difficult, which was unfortunate, because eating is generally considered essential. Despite all this, Charles was king, because bloodline mattered more than function. Courtiers described him as gentle, and pious, and very, very tired. He spent much of his life being moved from room to room, propped up by attendants, while advisors ruled in his name. He married twice. Both marriages were childless. This caused absolute panic. The future of Spain rested on a man who could barely stand without help. Naturally, the court decided the problem was witchcraft. When Charles died in 1700, doctors performed an autopsy. They found organs in shocking condition: a heart the size of a peppercorn, corroded lungs, intestines that barely functioned. The official conclusion was that he had been cursed. No one wanted to say, perhaps marrying your niece wasn't ideal. And with that, the Spanish Habsburg line quietly ended, not with a bang, but with a long, exhausted exhale. Let's float away from Spain now, northward, across the Channel, to England, because English royalty found their own creative ways to suffer. England and the art of marital chaos. English kings were less consistent about marrying relatives. They preferred a bit of variety, which, somehow, did not improve outcomes. Take Henry VIII, because history insists that we take Henry VIII. Henry married 6 times, which is already more administrative work than anyone needs. He desperately wanted a son, not a daughter, a son. When his first wife, Catherine of Aragon, failed to produce a surviving male heir, Henry decided this was unacceptable. He asked the Pope for an annulment. The Pope said no, so Henry created his own church. This was not a metaphor. He simply removed England from Catholicism so he could remarry. Naturally, this made everything worse. His wives suffered accordingly. Catherine of Aragon was publicly cast aside after decades of loyalty. Anne Boleyn was beheaded. Jane Seymour died after childbirth. Anne of Cleves was rejected because Henry didn't find her attractive. Catherine Howard was executed. Catherine Parr survived by being cautious and very quiet. Henry himself changed dramatically over time. He began handsome, athletic, charming. He ended obese, in constant pain, with infected leg wounds that never healed. He smelled. This is documented. His temper grew shorter, his paranoia deeper, and yet he still believed himself chosen by God. His children grew up in this environment, unstable, traumatic, dangerous. Mary: I became deeply religious and bitter. Elizabeth: I learned that marriage could be fatal and opted out entirely. Edward VI was sickly and died young, which leads us, very gently, into the subject of royal childhoods. Sickly, spoiled, and sad. Medieval royal childhoods. Being born royal did not mean being safe, or loved, or comfortable. It meant expectations. From the moment you could walk, royal children were raised by servants, educated relentlessly, observed constantly. Affection was formal, praise was strategic, failure was not tolerated. Many royal children were sickly, medicine was primitive, living conditions were strange, heavy clothes, poor ventilation, constant candle smoke, and of course, genetics. Take Louis XIII of France, a shy, anxious child, frequently ill. His father was assassinated when Louis was 8. His mother took control, the court filled with intrigue and quiet hostility. Louis grew up isolated, uncomfortable with people, uncomfortable with intimacy. He married Anne of Austria. Their marriage was famously cold. For over 20 years they had no children. France panicked. When an heir finally arrived, it was Louis XIV, the Sun King. But Louis XIII never truly recovered from his childhood. He ruled competently, but unhappily, and this pattern repeats, again and again. Royal children were raised to rule, but not to feel. We'll pause here. Let the candles burn low. Let the names soften around the edges. In the next part, we'll drift into petty kings, jealous queens, and rulers whose personal insecurities quietly reshaped Europe. For now, rest. History isn't going anywhere. Alright, welcome back, or welcome further in. If you nodded off for a moment, that's perfect. If not, don't worry, we'll get there together. Let's pick up our slow walk through the echoing halls of royalty. The candles are still flickering, the tapestries are still drafty, and the people in charge are still, somehow, deeply unprepared for it. In this part, we'll spend some time with the pettiest kings and queens, the ones who ruled not with vision, but with grudges and insecurities, and the kind of emotional immaturity that really shouldn't come with an army. So let's drift onward. The pettiest and most dysfunctional kings and queens. History likes to present rulers as forces of destiny, lions, eagles, titans of will. In reality, many of them were just offended by neighbors, offended by spouses, offended by imagined slights that lived entirely in their own heads. And when you give someone absolute power and a fragile ego, things get awkward very quickly. Take Philip II of Spain. Philip ruled one of the largest empires the world had ever seen. Spain, the Netherlands, large parts of Italy, colonies across the oceans. He had unimaginable power and absolutely no ability to relax. Philip was serious, painfully serious. The kind of man who would read reports late into the night, correcting margins, rewriting orders, and second-guessing everyone beneath him. He believed deeply that God had personally chosen him, which meant that any setback was not a mistake, but a test. Philip married 4 times. Each time, he seemed hopeful that this marriage would bring comfort, or warmth, or at least a healthy heir. Each time, his wives died. He responded with increased devotion, more prayer, more isolation. Philip ruled from the Escurial, a palace that was also a monastery, which tells you almost everything you need to know. He disliked music, distrusted pleasure, and believed happiness was suspicious. When the Spanish Armada failed spectacularly against England, Philip did not reflect on logistics, or weather, or strategy. He simply concluded that God was displeased. Naturally, this mindset did not encourage flexibility, or joy, or very good decision-making. Let's drift east now, toward Prussia, where affection was considered a weakness. The soldier, king and the son who didn't measure up, Frederick William I of Prussia, ruled with discipline and fear. He loved the military, uniforms, drills, order. He hated art, music, philosophy. Unfortunately for him, his son loved all three. Young Frederick, later known as Frederick the Great, was sensitive, intellectual, interested in poetry and the flute. His father responded with rage. Frederick William beat his son, publicly humiliated him, mocked him relentlessly. At one point, young Frederick attempted to flee Prussia. He was caught, forced to watch the execution of his closest friend. This was meant as a lesson. Frederick survived. He became king and ruled brilliantly. But emotionally, something had been sealed shut. He avoided close relationships, preferred solitude, and trusted almost no one. Prussia gained a powerful ruler, but not a happy one, which seems to be a recurring trade. Let's soften the scene now. Drift south into France. Cold marriages and quiet resentments. French royalty specialized in appearances, grace, elegance, politeness. Behind the scenes, however, many marriages were quietly miserable. Take Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. They were young when they married, very young. Louis was awkward, shy, uncomfortable with intimacy. Marie Antoinette was isolated, lonely, and deeply out of place. For years, their marriage was not consummated, which caused endless gossip. Pamphlets circulated, rumors grew. Marie Antoinette was blamed, mocked, painted as frivolous. In truth, both were overwhelmed. They eventually had children, but the damage was done. Their inability to connect personally and politically would later become fatal. But for now, they lived quietly unhappy lives, trapped by expectations neither had chosen. This brings us back, gently, to childhood, because many of these dysfunctions began very early. Raised to rule, not to feel, royal children were rarely hugged, rarely comforted. They were observed, evaluated, corrected. They were taught languages, etiquette, theology. They were not taught how to process fear, or grief, or disappointment. When parents died, children were expected to endure. When siblings died, they were expected to move on. Emotions were private, and often ignored. This created adults who ruled nations, but struggled to manage themselves. Kings who reacted with anger, queens who retreated into isolation, rulers who mistook control for stability. And when their decisions affected millions, those private flaws became public disasters. Let's slow things down again. Take a breath. Let the names fade slightly. In the next part, we'll drift deeper into dynasties that collapsed under their own weight, into heirs who never should have ruled, and into the quiet end of royal lines that simply ran out of strength. For now, rest. You're doing just fine. History will wait. All right, welcome back again. Or welcome somewhere in between sleep and listening. If your thoughts are drifting, that's good. If the voices of kings and queens are starting to blend together, even better. In this part, we'll talk about endings, not dramatic ones with trumpets and speeches, but the slow, tired endings, the kind where a dynasty simply runs out of energy. No explosions, no grand finale. Just fading bloodlines, disappointing heirs, and thrones inherited by people who very clearly did not want the job. So let's drift onward. Dynasties that simply ran out of people. Royal families liked to imagine themselves eternal, chosen by God, anchored in destiny. But in practice, many dynasties ended the same way an old candle does, not blown out, just gone. Often, this happened because there were no suitable heirs left. Too many children had died young. Too many marriages had failed. Too much genetic damage had quietly accumulated. We've already visited the Spanish Habsburgs, so let's slide over to Austria. The Austrian Habsburgs lasted longer, but not healthier. Generation after generation, they clung to the same strategy: marry within the family, preserve power, trust God to handle the rest. What God actually handled was decline. By the 18th century, many Habsburg heirs were frail, prone to illness, emotionally rigid. Ruling became less about leadership and more about maintenance. This culminated, eventually, in Emperor Charles VI, a man obsessed with ensuring his daughter could inherit. He issued laws, treaties, endless negotiations, all to keep the dynasty intact. It worked. Briefly, his daughter, Maria Theresa, ruled competently. But the world around her had changed. Dynasties were no longer sacred, they were outdated, and Europe was getting restless. Let's drift east again, toward Russia. Heirs who were never meant to rule. Russian royalty had its own problems: isolation, paranoia, violence passed down like a family recipe. Take Peter III. Peter was raised in Germany. He spoke Russian poorly. He admired Prussia. Unfortunately, he ruled Russia. He was awkward, childish, disinterested in governance. His wife, Catherine, noticed this immediately. Catherine was intelligent, observant, and very aware that her husband was a liability. Peter alienated the nobility, the military, pretty much everyone. Within months of becoming Tsar, he was overthrown. Shortly after that, he died in custody. Officially, from illness. Naturally, Catherine became Catherine the Great, a capable ruler, but one who understood very clearly that survival mattered more than sentiment. Their marriage had been loveless, their partnership non-existent, another royal union that produced power, but no peace. Children who inherited too early sometimes. Dynasties didn't collapse because of bad rulers, but because rulers arrived too young. Child kings were common and disastrous. A child cannot govern, but a child can be used. Regents fought, nobles schemed, courts fractured. Take England's Henry VI. He became king as an infant. The adults around him ruled in his name. By the time Henry was old enough to rule, he was deeply unstable, prone to long periods of catatonia. During these episodes, he could not speak, or move, or recognize his surroundings. England unraveled into the Wars of the Roses, all because a crown had been placed on a baby, which, in hindsight, was not ideal. Let's soften things again. Not every ending was violent. Some were simply sad. The quiet loneliness of the last ones. Some rulers were the last of their line. They knew it. They ruled knowing there would be no continuation, no legacy. Take Queen Elizabeth I. She was the final Tudor monarch. She never married, never had children. This was partly strategy, and partly trauma. She had watched her mother be executed, watched her stepmothers die, watched marriage destroy women, so she chose solitude. She ruled well, but she aged alone. By the end of her life, she was tired, ill, and deeply aware that her dynasty ended with her. When she died, England quietly passed to another family. The Tudors became history, not with a collapse, but with a transition. And this is how many royal stories end, not with glory, but with exhaustion. Centuries of power, reduced to paperwork and portraits. We'll stop here for now. In the next part, we'll drift into the strange rituals of court life, the boredom, the obsession with etiquette, and the way absolute power can become deeply dull. For now, rest, let the crowns fade, let the dynasties sleep. You're exactly where you need to be. Welcome back. Or welcome deeper into that soft, half-awake place where history turns into background noise. If you've lost track of who ruled what, that's fine. Most of them did too. In this part, we're drifting away from battles and bloodlines, and into something far less exciting. Daily life at court. Because while royalty had enormous power, they also had something else in abundance. Routine, rules, and boredom. So much boredom. Life at court. Endless ritual. Very little freedom. Royal courts were not glamorous in the way films suggest. They were structured, repetitive, and relentlessly observed. Every movement was ceremonial. Who could enter a room? Who could sit? Who could speak? Even waking up was a public act. Take the French court at Versailles. The king did not wake up alone. He was watched. The leve of the king's morning rising was a ritual attended by courtiers who handed him clothing in a precise order, who watched him dress, who competed for the honor of being close enough to matter. This was considered prestigious, which tells you how desperate court life could be. Privacy did not exist. Solitude was suspicious. Even eating was performance. Meals were public. The king chewed while people watched and bowed. It was power, yes, but it was also exhausting. Etiquette as a weapon. Court etiquette wasn't just about manners. It was about control. Rules determined status, and breaking them could end careers. Who walked ahead of whom? Who sat on a chair? Who stood? These details mattered more than competence. This created an environment of constant anxiety. Courtiers obsessed over placement, over wording, over tone. A wrong glance could spark resentment. A missed invitation could ruin a family, and monarchs knew this. Some used it deliberately. Louis XIV mastered this system. He kept nobles busy with ceremonies so they wouldn't plot while they fought over ribbons and invitations. He ruled, clever, effective, and deeply draining for everyone involved. Royal isolation. Despite being surrounded by people, monarchs were often lonely. Friendship was dangerous. Trust was risky. Everyone wanted something. So kings and queens learned to withhold, to distance, to perform. This created rulers who were emotionally isolated. They lived in palaces, but rarely felt at home. Take Emperor Rudolph II. He ruled the Holy Roman Empire from Prague. He withdrew from court life, surrounded himself with art, astrology, and alchemy. He distrusted people, avoided politics, and slowly lost control of his empire. He preferred objects to humans, which, honestly, many people can relate to. But in his case, it led to chaos, boredom, and decay. As centuries passed, royalty became ceremonial. Power remained, but meaning thinned. Some rulers simply drifted. They delegated, delayed, avoided decisions. Courts became stagnant. And while the world outside changed technology, trade, ideas, royal life stayed rigid. This disconnect bred resentment, and eventually, revolution. But for now, we stay before that. In the long, slow afternoons of fading relevance, let's slow down again. Notice how quiet it all feels. The rustle of fabric, the echo of footsteps, the endless waiting. In the next part, we'll gently approach the moment when people stopped believing in divine right, when crowns began to feel heavy and optional. For now, rest. Let the rituals repeat themselves. History is still whispering, welcome back, or perhaps you never really left. If your mind drifted somewhere between a velvet curtain and a half-remembered name, that's ideal. We'll continue gently, no sudden movements. In this part, we're approaching a subtle shift. Not a revolution yet, not shouting crowds or falling palaces, just a quiet change in belief. A moment when people began to look at their rulers and feel something other than awe. The slow unraveling of divine right. For centuries, European royalty relied on a single, powerful idea. God chose them. This explained everything. Their power, their wealth, their mistakes. If a king failed, it was a test. If a queen was cruel, it was divine mystery. Convenient. But over time, cracks appeared. Wars became longer. Taxes became heavier. Lives became harder. And rulers began to look human to human. People noticed that kings got sick, that queens panicked, that heirs died like everyone else. The illusion thinned. Philosophers began asking questions. Quietly at first. What if rulers were not chosen? What if they were simply born lucky? This was a dangerous thought, but once introduced, it did not go away. Royals who couldn't keep up. Some monarchs adapted, others did not. Take Louis XV of France. He inherited the throne young. At first, he was beloved. Then he grew distant, disengaged. He preferred hunting and private pleasures. Government bored him. Corruption spread. Debt grew. The people noticed. By the end of his reign, public affection had evaporated. His successor would inherit not just a crown, but widespread resentment, which is not ideal. The emotional distance problem. As belief in divine right faded, another issue surfaced. Royal emotional distance. Kings and queens were trained to appear above ordinary life. This now worked against them. They seemed cold, unreachable. When people suffered, rulers appeared unmoved. Marie Antoinette became a symbol of this disconnect. Not because she was uniquely cruel, but because she was visible. Her dresses, her isolation, her awkward attempts at normalcy. The myth overtook the reality. And once myth turns hostile, it's hard to undo. The heirs who felt the weight. Some heirs sensed the change. They felt the pressure, the unease. They inherited thrones that no longer felt stable. Take Charles I of England. He believed deeply in divine right, more deeply than his people did. This mismatch led to tension, then war. Then something unthinkable. A king tried and executed. This sent shockwaves across Europe. Crowns were no longer inviolable. They could be removed. A new kind of tiredness by this point. Royalty wasn't just physically exhausted. It was ideologically tired. Old justifications no longer convinced. Old rituals felt hollow. Some monarchs sensed this and tried to reform. Others clung tighter. Neither approach guaranteed survival. What had once felt eternal now felt negotiable. Let's slow here. You can feel the air change, the certainty thinning, the power shifting. In the next part, we'll drift into the final quiet irony. What happened to royalty when they lost belief in themselves, but kept the palaces? For now, rest. The crowns are still on, but they're slipping. Welcome back, or welcome back enough. If you're half asleep now, that's perfect. This is the part where history itself starts to yawn a little. We've reached a strange phase in royal history. The crowns are still there. The titles remain impressive. The palaces are very much intact. But something essential is missing. Conviction. Power without belief. Once people stopped believing that kings ruled by divine command, monarchy became awkward. Because what is a king, really, if he's just a man in an expensive chair? For centuries, the answer had been God. Now, the answer was less clear. Some monarchs tried to reinvent themselves. They leaned into being first servants of the state, administrators, symbols. Others simply carried on as if nothing had changed. This was optimistic. The rise of decorative royalty by the 18th and 19th centuries, many monarchs became ceremonial figures. They opened buildings, they attended events, they waved a lot. Actual governance shifted elsewhere, to ministers, to parliaments, to people who did paperwork. Some royals accepted this quietly, others resented it deeply. Take George III of Britain. He ruled during enormous change, American independence, political reform, growing public scrutiny. He tried to be a moral, dutiful king. He really did. But he also suffered from recurring illness, periods of confusion, loss of control. During these episodes, the illusion of royal strength faltered. The king was not eternal. He was fragile, and people saw it. Living as a symbol, being symbolic sounds easy. It isn't. Symbols are watched constantly, interpreted endlessly, blamed frequently. Royals had to appear calm, stable, unchanging, even when they were anxious, or grieving, or deeply unsure. This emotional suppression created a new kind of loneliness. Earlier monarchs ruled absolutely. Later monarchs were expected to reassure. Both were exhausting. The strange sadness of later monarchs. Many later royals lived long, quiet, restrained lives. Not tyrants, not heroes, just figures. They performed tradition, maintained appearances, and rarely expressed personal desire. Some accepted this role with grace, others with resentment. A few withdrew entirely. Take Ludwig II of Bavaria. He adored fantasy, castles, operas. He disliked politics, avoided governance. He retreated into imagination while his kingdom ran without him. Eventually, he was declared insane, removed, and died mysteriously. Whether he was mad or simply overwhelmed is still debated, but his story reflects something important. Royal life had become unbearable for those who wanted to be human, when being ordinary became dangerous. Ironically, the more monarchs tried to seem relatable, the more criticism they faced. Too distant, and they were cold. Too familiar, and they were mocked. There was no safe middle ground. Public opinion became a force, unpredictable, relentless, and once royalty depended on approval instead of fear, everything changed. The long echo of old habits. Despite all this, royal families kept their traditions. They still married strategically, still raised children carefully, still emphasized duty over comfort. Old habits die hard, but the world no longer bent around them. They had to adapt, or shrink, or fade. Let's slow down again. You can feel how quiet this part of history is. No clashes, no declarations, just long lives lived carefully, cautiously. In the next part, we'll drift into the private side of modern royalty, the emotional inheritance, the pressure passed down quietly, generation after generation. For now, rest. The palaces are still standing, but they echo, welcome back, or welcome back enough to hear the soft parts. If you're drifting in and out, that's perfect. This part is less about events, and more about what lingers, because even when crowns lost power, something else remained. Expectation, pressure, memory. Royalty, by this point, had become an inheritance of atmosphere, being born into a role you can't refuse. Modern royal children were no longer born to rule absolutely, but they were still born to represent. From the moment they arrived, they were watched, photographed, commented on. Their names were chosen carefully, their clothes, their expressions. They learned early how to stand, how to wave, how not to react. This was not cruelty, it was tradition. But tradition has a way of pressing quietly on the chest. Emotional restraint as a family language. Earlier royal families discouraged emotion to preserve authority. Later ones did it to preserve image. The result was similar. Children learned to smile politely, to grieve privately, to disappoint silently. They were surrounded by people, but rarely unguarded. Affection existed, but often filtered through duty, and so emotions became something to manage, rather than feel. The weight of continuity. Modern royals carry centuries with them. Every gesture is compared, every choice analyzed. They inherit not just titles, but expectations shaped by people long dead. You're not just yourself, you're a symbol, a continuation. This can create a strange tension. You're encouraged to be relatable, but not too much. Human, but not ordinary. Private lives under glass. Unlike their ancestors, modern royals cannot disappear into palaces. They are visible, constantly. Their marriages, their disagreements, their unhappiness, all observed. This makes failure feel public and rest feel impossible. Some adapt, some retreat, some quietly struggle. The inheritance of silence. What connects medieval kings to modern royals isn't power, it's restraint. The same quiet training, the same emphasis on composure. Centuries apart, the lesson remains. Do not burden the public with your feelings, which can make feelings heavier. When tradition becomes loneliness for some, the role provides meaning, structure, purpose. For others, it becomes isolating. A life planned before you can speak. Choices shaped by expectations you didn't create. Not tragic, but quietly sad. And still, the crowns remain despite everything. Royalty persists, changed, reduced, adapted, no longer divine, no longer feared, but still present, still symbolic, still carrying centuries of habit. Let's slow here. This part of history doesn't end, it just continues. Passed gently, carefully, sometimes unwillingly. In the final part, we'll drift toward reflection. Why these stories still hold us, why we keep listening. For now, rest. The inheritance is heavy, but you don't have to carry it. Welcome back, or welcome to the soft ending of all this. If your eyes are closed now, that's perfectly fine. You don't need to see this part, just let it pass through. We've wandered through centuries of crowns and corridors, through marriages that should not have happened, childhoods that never really were, power that slowly forgot why it existed. So the question drifts in quietly now. Why do we still care? The comfort of familiar distance. Royal history is safe in a way. The people are long gone. The mistakes are complete. We can observe without risk, judge without consequence. Their lives feel distant enough to be gentle. Even when they were unhappy, they suffered. But not like us, at least. That's how it feels. Power without control. There's also comfort in watching powerful people fail quietly. Kings who couldn't fix themselves. Queens trapped by roles. It reminds us that status doesn't guarantee peace. That wealth doesn't erase loneliness. That control over others does not equal control over the self. Which is oddly reassuring. The illusion of order. Royal stories promise structure, lineages, successions, clear beginnings and ends. Even when messy, they feel organized. This gives the mind something to rest against. Patterns, cycles, repeats. A sense that chaos has rules. Why these stories lull us? There's a rhythm to dynasties. Rise, stagnation, decline, over and over. It's predictable, almost soothing. The names change, the mistakes don't, and predictability is restful. Human enough to relate to despite the crowns. These people were human, anxious, insecure, often unprepared. They wanted approval, they feared failure, they avoided difficult conversations. Very relatable behavior, just with better furniture. Listening as a form of rest. When we listen to these stories softly, without urgency, something happens. The drama loses its edge. The tragedy becomes distant. What remains is tone, cadence, repetition, a mental rocking motion, which is exactly what we need at the end of the day. The final quiet irony, the ultimate irony of royalty is this. They were raised to be unforgettable, but most of them aren't. They blur together. A long procession of similar faces, similar fears, similar mistakes, and somehow, that's comforting. So, as we reach the end of this drift through history, you don't need to remember who ruled when. You don't need to recall names or dates. Just the feeling of candlelight, of echoes, of tired power, finally at rest. Thank you for listening, or half listening, or falling asleep somewhere along the way. Wherever you are now, good night. All right, this is the last stretch. Not an ending, exactly. More like the quiet after everything has already been said. If you're still awake, that's fine. If you're not, this part will take care of itself. We're not adding new kings now. No more marriages, no more dynasties. Just a gentle unwinding. When stories stop asking for attention at some point, history stops demanding focus. The details loosen, the sharp edges soften. Kings become silhouettes. Queens become names without faces. And that's okay. History doesn't need to be held tightly. It's been held tightly enough already. The gentle relief of irrelevance. There's a strange comfort in knowing that even the most powerful people eventually become background. Once feared rulers reduced to footnotes. Once glorious courts reduced to tourist routes. No more decisions, no more pressure, just silence. In a way, it's the kindest ending. The long sleep of power empires don't explode every time. Sometimes they just get tired. They slow down. They repeat themselves until no one is really listening anymore. And then they rest, like everything else does, eventually. You don't have to carry this forward, unlike royal heirs. You don't inherit this weight. You don't have to remember which crown passed to whom. You don't have to preserve a name. You can just let it go. That's a privilege most of them never had. History is a low, steady sound at its best. History becomes ambient, a murmur, a rhythm, something steady enough to quiet the mind. That's what it's doing now. No lessons, no morals, just presence. The last candle, imagine a single candle in a vast hall. It's burned for centuries, watched generations come and go, and now it's almost out. No rush, no ceremony, just a small flame growing smaller. So wherever you are, in bed, on a couch, half asleep, somewhere between, let this be the moment you stop listening. The crowns are set down, the corridors are empty, the doors close softly, and history finally rests. Good night. Welcome back, or welcome fully, to that place between thought and sleep. If you've been following along, you've traveled centuries already, through marble halls, gilded crowns, and shadowed corridors. And now, we arrive at the very gentle conclusion. This is the part where history itself exhales. No drama, no plots, no demands. Crowns left behind. All the kings and queens we've met are now silent. Their crowns rest in museums, their thrones empty. Their whispers fade into dust. The mistakes, the ambition, the endless ceremonies, all that remains is memory. And your mind doesn't need to hold it. You can let it go. The quiet of human frailty, even royalty. Those who seemed larger than life were human, sickly, insecure, lonely. Their stories remind us that power never guarantees comfort, and sometimes observing that from a distance is strangely reassuring. We see the weight they carried, and we know we don't have to. The slow fade of dynasties. Dynasties end quietly, not always with fire and revolution. Sometimes they fade like a candle in a draft. Their echo softens, their importance diminishes, and eventually, almost no one notices. This is how centuries of absolute power quietly become history. Your own rest at this point. You can stop trying to follow names or events. Let the images of palaces, coronations, and cold corridors dissolve. Let the flicker of candlelight and rustle of silk fill your imagination instead. This is the reward of listening slowly, a mind free to rest while centuries pass softly around you. The gentle end. The final irony of royalty is simple. For all their effort, all their rituals, all their wealth and ceremony, most of them are gone, and history moves on, and so can you. Let your thoughts drift. Let the echoes of courts, crowns, and cautious children fade. Let sleep arrive. The corridors are empty, the crowns are set down, and the quiet finally wins. Good night. Welcome back, or perhaps you never really left. This is the softest part yet, the part where even history takes a break. All the crowns, all the ceremonies, all the careful attention to protocol, they are gone now. Even the echoes of stone corridors have quieted. The end of watching. You don't need to remember any more names, any battles, any royal disappointments. All of it can float away, like leaves on a slow river. You are safe to let go. You don't need to intervene. You don't need to judge. The people who once carried the weight of empires have finally set it down. The comfort of distance. Sometimes the most powerful people are the saddest, and sometimes the smallest gestures. An absent heir, a lonely child, a candle burned low. Speak louder than crowns or armies. Watching them from afar allows us a gentle perspective, a reminder. Even absolute authority cannot protect from human frailty. Even the mightiest eventually rest. Your own drift, so you can let your thoughts soften. The tapestry of history, the repetitive cycles of ambition, failure, and exhaustion, all of it can become a soothing hum. Imagine the halls empty, the windows open to quiet gardens, the wind rustling gently across tapestries. Everything slows, everything rests. Sleep among kings. You are not expected to carry their burdens. You are allowed to drift, to fold yourself into your own quiet. The monarchs, the palaces, the endless ceremonial steps, they are silent now, and you are free. So close your eyes. Let the candle burn its last flicker. Let history fade, and let sleep arrive. Good night.